I first heard about Langford Wilson's play Burn This from my mother. In her life, she has seen a fair number of Broadway plays, but as soon as she saw that there was a new revival of this one, she texted me to tell me I absolutely had to go see it, because it is among the only shows to really stick with her. And it's been 30 plus years. So I looked into it and saw that it was being led by Adam freaking Driver. So I went. Hello, everyone, anyone, and welcome to the Week I Review. You can call me a guy who takes life advice from Kylo Ren, but not in the way you think. And today, I'm talking about the current Broadway production of Burn This. Though I actually saw the show a little while ago, I wanted to discuss it in the same week that I put out my review of Nassim, because both of them trade heavily on celebrity. That one having a different person of note at each performance, and this one by plastering those noteworthy names just all over the place in its marketing. If you see a lot of these shows, you notice that something kind of odd happens when a famous outside of the theater community person comes on stage. The audience claps. They don't do this for regular stage actors, of course, but when Tony Shalhoub comes in the band's visit, or Daniel Craig appears in Othello, Chris Evans walks into Lobby Hero, or any of the myriad others, their appearance forces a pause in the show because the royal we, I guess, want famous people to know that we know that they are famous, in case they were worried that we didn't, in case they thought we had come to see the recent revival of True West for any reason other than to watch Paul Dano and Ethan Hawke squabble for a few hours. But here's the thing. Mark Ruffalo is great on screen, but he noticeably flubbed multiple lines when I saw him in The Price. Monk is lovely, but Tony Shalhoub's accent in the band's visit was distracting as hell. Kerry Russell may have been an anchor in The Americans, but some of her most emotional moments in Burn This just fall a little flat. And yet, the star's presence in these starring roles only grows. It feels like every new show that opens does so with someone you have probably heard of in the leading role, and maybe several of them. Most are limited runs, going exactly as long as folks can take off before their next big shoot. It's not like this is totally new. Even the 1987 production of Burn This was led by John Malkovich, already an Emmy winner and Academy Award nominee by that time, although he actually got his start in theater and had 2 Obie Awards before he even touched the screen. But this feels exponential now. In a way, Broadway has become the new indie cinema, where quote-unquote serious actors go when they're tired of the Hollywood machine. And that's kind of frustrating because, as discussed earlier, they're not always the right people for the job. If you dig through New York's enormous talent pool, you're going to find someone whose blood, sweat, and tears are in the theater. But acting on camera is a massively different skill from performing for an audience. And I think that some of these household names overestimate themselves. And of course, Broadway marketing teams are content to just let that be true. Why? Because I saw Burn This in large part because I wanted to see Adam Driver.
Hypocrite.
Yeah, kind of. How can I really complain about the rise of celebrities on stage when I paid to see Daniel Craig and David Oyelowo in Othello? But gosh darn if I didn't have to see Daniel Craig be Iago. Sometimes they really are worth it, as with Othello. I will never forget the experience of seeing Daniel Craig sing an acoustic version of Drake's Hotline Bling. It was perfect. Adam Driver here is another example, and how couldn't he have been? He is one of the most interesting actors working today, killing it both as a whiny baby boy in Star Wars and a poet/bus driver in Patterson. See Patterson, folks. In person, Driver is larger than I had realized, especially when put beside the unexpectedly tiny Kerry Russell, and the oversized suits just make him a big ol' presence, and, he was present long before he actually got on stage, conceptually, because his absence from the first scene is conspicuous. Driver gets top billing, so you may reasonably expect his character, Pale, to be there at the outset, or at least soon after. But Pale isn't technically the protagonist of this show. Kerry Russell's Anna is. She is the center around which the drama takes place. It's her roommate, Larry, her romantic interest, Burton, and the brother of her deceased other roommate/dance partner, Pale, who round out the cast. She has more stage time than anyone else. But it's not really her show. Do you remember A Star is Born, that movie from last year? It's a big deal, the one about the birth of a star, but actually about her failure of a husband's reaction to her success. This reminded me of that. Though not quite as bad, Anna is still ultimately a pretty passive entity who gets to say a fair amount, but not really do much independently. A Star is Born is a story told 4+ times, dating back to at least 1937 and arguably even earlier. This one most closely relates to the 1976 one, but there's a fundamental difference. A Star is Born 2018 is not the script of A Star is Born 76 reenacted. But Burn This 2019 is. Such is the nature of theater revivals. And there may be tweaks to language, but the text on stage 3 decades ago is the same text as now. No one is making new movies with 30+-year-old scripts. Even the one real exception to this rule, that Shakespeare's many 100-years-old words end up on both stage and screen, exemplifies this fundamental difference between the art forms. It's telling that the transplanting of language and time in Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet stood out as it did. That Othello I keep mentioning was set in a military barracks in a time when soldiers literally play Guitar Hero on stage while the audience goes to their seats. Last year, Shakespeare in the Park's Julius Caesar made a whole bunch of people who didn't understand the show very angry by literally dressing it in a more modern political context. This is par for the course on stage, and admittedly, it is easy for theater to have such temporal fluidity. A movie, on the other hand, is a facsimile, attempting to actually depict rather than just represent or evoke. And depictions of the 1980s made in the 2010s just don't quite match those made in the 80s, because 80s films were 80s by necessity, or at least convenience. Now it is a deliberate choice. The current production of Burn This is set in 1987 by convenience as well, because it was written in that present. And outside of some awkward, distracting musical transitions, there's not much to highlight its time period. As there shouldn't be. It doesn't really matter that it's in the 80s, though plenty has changed since then. A whole lot has stayed exactly the same, and this show is still relevant 30 years later. I mean, there's a reason why they decided to bring it back. And all things considered, it's great. My mom was quite right. As much as I wish Anna was a more active participant in her own drama, I can't deny the quality of Langford Wilson's dialogue or Michael Mayer's direction or the absolute force of nature that is just Adam Driver's existence. From the second he bangs on the door from offstage at the start of the second scene, he commands all of the attention and controls it throughout. But his co-stars are all worthy of praise as well. Even Russell, who nails it 95% of the time. I laughed. I was moved, not quite to tears, but I was shocked by the single most realistic stage punch I have ever seen, followed by the second most realistic stage punch I have ever seen. I mean, it was just a quality way to see Adam Driver do his thing for a few hours. And it's unfortunate that that's the conclusion that I draw, that that's really what I was there for. I don't like this trend, but I can't really fault anyone for it. I'm part of the problem. 8.3 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching. I wasn't really sure if I was going to do this video, but after seeing Nassim, I felt compelled to try to get them both in one week, and cut it pretty close, but I did it. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I'm sorry. If you want to see more, please subscribe. Now I have to go do my actual Monday video. I have to see you then.